Article 4 consultation with China, I think, found China continuing to be a global bright spot for growth. We expect growth this year to be in the 9 to 10% range. Inflation has been a concern over the past year, particularly a social concern. Our view is that inflation is close to peaking and will soon start to decline in the second half of this year. The other focus of the staff report this year and the consultation was on rebalancing, and particularly on the financial sector aspects of rebalancing the Chinese economy and how the financial sector reform in China can contribute to moving the economy away from reliance on exports and towards a more consumption-driven economy. So I think we've looked quite carefully at the financial system, and the current financial system is quite tightly controlled. There are limits on the amounts that banks can lend. The government directly regulates deposit and loan rates. I think what we're trying to look for is moving towards a more market-based system of financial intermediation in China. And that will need reforms on a number of fronts. It will need changes to the way monetary policy is conducted in China. It will also need a stronger exchange rate in order to give the monetary authorities a little bit more autonomy in deciding monetary policy. There'll need to be changes in the supervisory and regulatory regime, and eventually they'll need to move towards liberalization of deposit and loan rates. This whole process will be quite a long-term process. We see it taking at least 5 years to put all of these reforms in place. And I should add that this process is actually quite risky. So the government has to be quite careful in both how it designs this reform program and how it sequences these reforms. Because we've seen in international experience a number of countries who've tried to liberalize their financial system in this way have either created instability or even crises in some cases. What we see in China right now is a move by the monetary authorities to withdraw monetary stimulus as the economy moves back to a much stronger growth path. We think that's fully appropriate. The way that the stimulus has been withdrawn so far has relied more on quantitative limits on credit growth and less on use of more traditional monetary policy tools like interest rates. And we'd like to see somewhat shift in that balance towards a greater reliance on using interest rates to slow down credit growth and less on the administrative controls. What we've seen over the past year, I think, has been some moderation in property price inflation in China. We think that's a good thing. A large part of that has been driven by the measures the government has taken in order to prevent people from speculating in the property market and also to provide more supply of housing into the market. So those have been very positive policy actions. Nevertheless, I think when we look at the financial system and the property market in particular in China, there's still a very strong propensity for property bubbles in their current system. Well, I think the findings of that report show China to be very central in the global economy, now at a point where not only it will transmit shocks through the global economy, but it's also able to originate shocks outwards towards the global economy. I think in discussions with China's partners as part of that spillover report process, there was a lot of interest in China, in their partner countries, in rebalancing in China, in moving China towards a more consumption-driven model. I think generally the sense was that moving China in that direction, raising household income in China, improving the living standards of the Chinese people, will actually have very positive spillover effects to the global economy and to trading partners.